Life can flip upside down in the blink of an eye. One moment, you're planning your future with the love of your life, and the next, you're standing alone, staring at a world that suddenly feels too big and too empty. 6 months ago, I was Mia Carter, happily married to Ethan, dreaming about the family we would build together. Now, I was a widow, trying to remember how to breathe without him. His accident was brutal. A head-on collision with a semi-truck left nothing but twisted metal and a closed casket funeral. People kept telling me how strong I was, but the truth? I felt like a ghost, floating through my own life. The funeral, the condolences, the endless nights of silence. I survived them all, but barely. If it weren't for my parents stepping in, I don't know how I would have handled the funeral arrangements. "Sweetheart, we'll take care of everything," Mom had said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You just rest." Rest? How do you rest when the love of your life is gone? I spent weeks locked inside our house, drowning in grief. But slowly, painfully, I started functioning again. My job at the marketing agency became my escape. I cut my hours, but kept working because the thought of being alone in our home all day made my skin crawl. Then came my sister, Olivia. Growing up, Olivia had always been the golden child. She was the one who got the attention, the praise, the love. If she wanted something, she got it. If she messed up, she was forgiven. Me? I was the responsible one, the one who never needed anything, so I got left behind. After Ethan's death, my relationship with our parents actually improved. They called me more, invited me to dinner every Sunday, even asked about my work for the first time in years. And then Olivia walked back and 7 months pregnant. I hadn't seen her since Ethan's funeral, and honestly, I didn't even know she was pregnant. She showed up at dinner one evening, her stomach leading the way, and just like that, everything shifted back to the way it used to be. "Olivia, honey, sit down. Are you comfortable?" Mom fussed, practically shoving me aside to make room for her. "Do you need anything? More pillows? Some tea?" Just like that, I was invisible again. I picked at my food, watching as Olivia basked in the attention. I tried to be happy for her, I really did. But something about the way she avoided my eyes all evening made my stomach churn. "So, who's the father?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She stiffened. "That's my business." Mom immediately jumped to her defense. "Mia, don't pry. Your sister doesn't owe anyone an explanation." Funny, they had no problem grilling me about my marriage when Ethan and I were struggling to have kids. "How are you planning to manage on your own?" I pressed, watching Olivia pile more food onto her plate. "Babies are expensive," she smirked. "Don't worry, I've got everything figured out." That smirk, it was the same one she used whenever she was scheming. And Olivia always had a plan, a get-rich-quick business, an investment that never panned out, a boyfriend with deep pockets. I should have paid more attention to that smirk. A week later, she called me. "Mia, I'm having my baby shower next weekend at Mom and Dad's. You'll come, right?" I almost dropped my phone. Olivia inviting me to something? She never invited me anywhere unless she needed something. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Of course," she said, overly sweet. "You're my sister. It wouldn't be the same without you." Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed it aside. Maybe she was finally trying to bridge the gap between us. "I'll be there," I promised. The following Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house with a neatly wrapped gift, a high-end baby monitor, and a handmade blanket. I'd spent weeks knitting. No matter what I felt about Olivia, this was still my future niece or nephew. The house looked like a pastel explosion. Pink and blue balloons everywhere, mountains of gifts, and a towering cake made of diapers. Olivia had gone all out. She always did when she wanted attention. The place was packed. Mom's friends, our aunts, Olivia's old college roommates. I barely made it through the front door before Olivia spotted me. "Mia!" she beamed, throwing her arms around me in a hug that felt a little too tight, a little too staged. "I'm so glad you're here. Something was off. I just didn't know what." Then came the games, the usual baby shower nonsense. Guess the baby's birth date, measure Olivia's belly with string, melted chocolate bars and diapers, seriously. Who came up with that one? I won the belly measuring contest, and Olivia didn't look pleased about it. And then, when the gifts were unwrapped and the laughter had died down, she clinked her glass. "I just want to thank everyone for coming today," she said, her voice dripping with something too sweet. One hand rested on her stomach. "But there's something I need to share. Something big." The room quieted. My heart started racing, though I didn't know why. "I think it's time everyone knew who my baby's father is." The air thickened, and then she turned, locking eyes with me. I knew. I knew before she even said it. "It's Ethan," she announced. "Mia's late husband is the father of my baby." For a moment, the world stopped. Then, like a dam breaking, gasps and whispers flooded the room. I could hear someone drop their glass. Someone else muttered, "Oh my God," but all I could do was stare at Olivia, my body frozen in place. Ethan? My Ethan? No. No, it wasn't possible. My mind struggled to catch up, to make sense of the words that had just left her mouth. But the way she was looking at me smug, victorious, sent a sharp jolt of nausea through me. I gripped the edge of a nearby chair, willing my voice to work. "You're lying." It came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Olivia tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Why would I lie about something like this?" She reached into her bag, pulling out her phone with a theatrical flourish. "If you don't believe me, maybe this will convince you." She turned the screen toward me, and just like that, my stomach dropped. There they were, Ethan and Olivia wrapped in each other's arms in what looked like a hotel room. His lips pressed to her forehead, his hand resting on her stomach. Another photo, them at dinner, holding hands, laughing, and then texts. Screenshot after screenshot of messages between them. "Ethan, I don't love her anymore. I want to be with you." Olivia. "Then tell her. She deserves to know." Ethan, after the divorce. "I promise. You and the baby are my future." My vision blurred. Divorce? He was planning to leave me? I couldn't breathe. The room, the voices, everything faded into a distant hum as my mind tried to reconcile what I was seeing. Ethan, the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my whole heart, a liar, a cheater, and Olivia, my own sister. This can't be real," I choked out. Mom stepped forward, her face unreadable. "Mia, honey, maybe we should talk about this privately. How long?" My voice wavered, but I forced myself to stand tall. "How long were they together?" Silence. Then Olivia sighed dramatically. 6 months before he died. "We didn't plan for this to happen, Mia, but sometimes love finds you in unexpected places." My knees nearly buckled. 6 months. That meant, while I was holding Ethan's hand in the hospital, crying over our struggles to have a baby, he was with her. While I was blaming myself, thinking I was the problem, he was sleeping with my sister. And my parents, they weren't even shocked. "You knew." My voice was barely above a whisper, but the accusation was deafening. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, and that was all the confirmation I needed. "Oh my God." I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and cold. "You knew, and you still let me mourn him like a fool." Dad sighed. "Mia, sweetheart, we didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out? You mean be humiliated in front of a room full of people?" I gestured to the stunned guests, some of whom were now openly whispering. Mom had the audacity to look hurt. "We were just trying to do what's best for the baby." "The baby?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "Yes," Olivia cut in, flipping her hair like she wasn't standing in the middle of a disaster she had just created. "And as Ethan's only child, my son is entitled to his inheritance. Half of everything he left you should rightfully be mine." A cold, suffocating rage spread through my chest. "You're out of your damn mind," I spat. "You think you can just show up, drop this bomb, and take half of my life?" "It's not just your life," Olivia countered, crossing her arms. "Ethan wanted to build a future with me. He just didn't get the chance to tell you before I slammed my hand on the table, rattling the leftover plates. "Shut up," she flinched. "You don't get to rewrite history," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Ethan chose me. He married me. Whatever fantasy he sold you, whatever lies you told yourself, none of it matters." I turned to my parents. "And you too? You sat there every Sunday, smiling in my face, taking my money, knowing all along?" Mom had the nerve to look guilty. "We didn't want to hurt you. Oh, but this is okay?" I gestured wildly around the room. I could feel my heart pounding, my breath coming too fast. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't going to let them see me break. I squared my shoulders. "If you think you're getting a scent from me, you're delusional." Olivia smirked. That same "I always get what I want" look on her face. "You don't have a choice, Mia. Legally, my baby is Ethan's heir. I'll take this to court if I have to." A slow, eerie calm settled over me. "You want to play that game?" I reached into my bag, my fingers closing around the papers I had brought just in case. I pulled them out and tossed them onto the table. "Read it." Olivia frowned, snatching the papers up. As her eyes scanned the document, the smugness drained from her face. "What? What is this?" she stammered. I leaned in, my voice sharp and cutting. Proof that Ethan was infertile. He had a medical condition, complete azoospermia, which means he could never have children. Ever. This baby, I pointed at her stomach, isn't his. The color drained from Olivia's face. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh, shit." Mom snatched the papers from Olivia's hands, scanning them with wide eyes. "Olivia, tell me this isn't true." Olivia just stood there, frozen, her mouth opening and closing. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. Dad's face went rigid. "Olivia, whose baby is this?" She blinked rapidly, looking around like a cornered animal. Then, suddenly, she burst into tears. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I thought he told me." I laughed, cold and sharp. "Well, looks like you bet on the wrong man, Olivia." She turned to me, desperation creeping into her voice. "Mia, please," but I was already grabbing my things. "We're done here." Without another word, I walked out, leaving Olivia, my parents, and their shattered lies behind me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. I drove home in silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the occasional honk from impatient drivers I barely noticed. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles had turned white. I had spent the last 6 months drowning in grief for Ethan. I had cried over him, mourned him, missed him. And for what? For a man who had betrayed me with my own sister? For a family who had known and said nothing? I was done. By the time I reached my house, I felt numb. Like my body was moving on autopilot, going through the motions of parking, unlocking the door, stepping inside. But the moment I closed it behind me, reality slammed into me like a freight train. Ethan had never been the man I thought he was. I staggered into the living room, bracing myself against the couch as my breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. My chest ached, my stomach twisted, and my mind kept replaying everything: Olivia's smug face, my parents' betrayal, those damn text messages. I needed to get rid of everything. Before I could talk myself out of it, I marched up to our bedroom, my bedroom now. The space still smelled like Ethan's cologne, like the ghost of a life that no longer existed. I yanked open his closet, my fingers curling around the sleeves of his neatly hung shirts. One by one, I pulled them off their hangers, throwing them onto the floor. His jackets, his ties, his stupid favorite hoodie that I had once stolen to sleep in. Every last piece of him had to go. The bedside table came next. I ripped open the drawers, tossing out old receipts, random pocket change, a half-used notebook he had once scribbled work notes in. And then, buried underneath it all, I found his phone. His old phone. The one he had before upgrading last year. My heart pounded as I turned it over in my hands. Ethan had never been great at remembering passwords. And sure enough, after 2 wrong attempts, I got it right our wedding date. The screen lit up, revealing hundreds of texts, emails, and photos that hadn't been transferred to his new device. I should have stopped. I should have put it down, walked away, let the past stay buried. But I didn't. Instead, I opened his messages. And what I found made me sick. Ethan sent 4 months before his death, "Olivia, I can't keep doing this. Mia doesn't deserve this. Olivia, you love me, Ethan, not her. Stop pretending otherwise. Ethan, I need time to think. Olivia, you don't have time. I'm pregnant." The texts went on and on. Olivia pushing, manipulating, Ethan wavering, making excuses, saying he needed to figure things out. And then, 1 week before his accident, "Ethan, I need to tell Mia the truth." "Olivia, no." If you tell her now, you'll ruin everything. Wait until after the baby is born. She'll have no choice but to accept it." I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the screen still glowing, their words burning into my brain. Ethan had been planning to leave me, but Olivia had convinced him to wait to string me along, to lie to my face until she got what she wanted. And then he died. The thought made my stomach twist. If Ethan had lived, he would have eventually told me. I would have had to watch him pack his things, move in with Olivia, raise a child that was never his. And my parents, they would have supported it. They had always supported Olivia, no matter what she did. Even when she was wrong, even when she destroyed everything in her path, they still chose her. But not this time. Not anymore. I grabbed Ethan's phone and stormed downstairs, my mind racing. Olivia thought she had won. She thought she could manipulate me, take my money, walk away with half of Ethan's estate like some grieving widow. But she was about to learn the hard way. I wasn't someone she could play. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Miss Carter, are you sure you want to proceed with this?" Mr. Lawson asked, flipping through the pages of the contract I had just signed. "Absolutely." My voice was steady, stronger than I had felt in months. "Very well." He nodded, setting his pen down. "The lawsuit against Olivia Carter will be officially filed by the end of the day. You're suing for defamation, fraud, and emotional distress. Given the medical proof that Ethan was infertile, and the fact that Olivia knowingly attempted to claim part of his estate under false pretenses, you have a solid case." I exhaled, gripping the armrests of my chair. "And my parents?" I asked. He hesitated. "Legally, there's nothing you can do against them, but cutting off financial support was the right move. If they come after you for money again, I'd advise issuing a restraining order." I nodded. "Do it." I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in months. 2 days later, Olivia called. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Then another. Finally, I picked up. "Mia, what the hell is this? You're suing me?" she screeched, her voice sharp with panic. "Oh, so you can call when you need something," I said dryly. "That's new! You're being ridiculous!" Olivia shrieked. "We're family!" "You can't know, Olivia." My voice was cold, unyielding. "You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." She started crying. "Mia, please." I didn't know Ethan couldn't have kids. I thought, "I don't care what you thought." I cut her off. "You still tried to take everything from me. You still humiliated me in front of everyone. And now? You're going to pay for it." I hung up. For the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. And I wasn't about to let it go. The lawsuit was just the beginning. A week after I filed, the news spread like wildfire. Olivia had tried to keep it quiet, but in a town like ours, secrets didn't stay buried for long. People whispered. Eyes lingered a little too long when I walked into a room. And Olivia? She was drowning in the consequences of her own actions. I knew because she wouldn't stop calling. At first, it was screaming voicemails, full of rage and insults. "You're a heartless BH, Mia. You think you can ruin my life? You won't win." Then came the desperate ones. "Please, Mia. I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking. I don't know what to do. Please talk to me." I never responded. Because for once, I wasn't the one cleaning up Olivia's mess. But then my parents got involved. I should have known they wouldn't stay quiet forever. It started with texts from Mom. "Mom, Mia, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Mom, Olivia is struggling. She's your sister. Have some compassion. Mom, we raised you better than this. Family doesn't turn on family." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Then came the calls. At first, I ignored them. But when Dad showed up at my house unannounced, I knew they weren't going to let this go. I opened the door to find him standing there, arms crossed, his face tight with frustration. "Mia, this needs to stop." I leaned against the doorframe, unimpressed. "Good to see you too, Dad." He exhaled sharply. "Enough with the attitude. You've made your point." Olivia screwed up. "Fine. But suing her? Cutting us off? Do you really hate us that much?" I blinked. "You're joking, right?" "This isn't a joke," he snapped. "Your sister is struggling. She's a single mother, Mia. And thanks to you dragging her through court, she's losing everything. Do you really want your nephew to suffer because you're bitter? My stomach turned. Not because of guilt, but because of how predictable this all was. They didn't care about what Olivia had done to me. They only cared that she was finally facing the consequences. So let me get this straight, I said slowly, folding my arms. She lies about Ethan being her baby's father, tries to steal my inheritance, humiliates me in front of everyone, and I'm the problem. Dad's jaw tightened. We're trying to fix this, Mia. You're making it worse. Fix it? I let out a bitter laugh. You mean cover it up like you always do? Just sweep it under the rug and pretend Olivia didn't just try to ruin my life? She's your sister, he stressed, as if that excused everything. And Ethan was my husband, I shot back. But that didn't stop her, did it? His face darkened. You need to move on. I stared at him, stunned. Move on? Yes. He ran a hand through his graying hair. The lawsuit, the anger, it's not going to bring Ethan back. It's not going to change what happened. But it will destroy this family if you let it. I shook my head, stepping back. No, Dad. This family was already destroyed. I just finally saw it for what it really was. His expression hardened. You'll regret this. I didn't flinch. No. But you might. And with that, I shut the door in his face. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and ignored calls. Olivia fought the lawsuit with everything she had, but she was out of her league. The evidence was airtight. She had lied, attempted fraud, and publicly humiliated me in a way that had real consequences. The court wasn't on her side. When the final ruling came, it was swift and brutal. The court ruled in my favor. Olivia was ordered to pay damages for emotional distress. She lost any claim to Ethan's estate. And while she wasn't facing criminal charges yet, she was drowning in debt. I should have felt triumphant. But mostly, I just felt free. For the first time in my life, Olivia's drama wasn't my problem. Neither were my parents. I had already blocked their numbers, but that didn't stop them from trying to get to me through mutual relatives, old family friends, anyone who would listen. Mia needs to let this go. She's tearing the family apart over money. She's punishing her own nephew for something that isn't his fault. I stopped listening. They weren't my family anymore. The night after the court ruling, I sat in my quiet house, sipping a glass of wine, scrolling through my phone. Then a notification popped up, a friend request, Elizabeth Parker. I stared at the name, my heart pounding. Ethan's mother, the woman I had thought was dead. I hesitated for a long time before finally clicking accept. A message came through almost instantly. Elizabeth, the first no, this is sudden, but I think we should talk. A deep part of me wanted to ignore it. I had been through enough. I wasn't sure I had the energy for another revelation. But another part of me, the part that still needed answers, typed out a response. Me? When and where? I barely slept that night. Elizabeth Parker, Ethan's mother, the woman he had sworn was dead. I had spent years believing he was an orphan, that he had grown up without a family. It was one of the things that bonded us, our complicated relationships with the people who were supposed to love us. And yet, here she was, alive, reaching out to me. By morning, my nerves were shot. I had no idea what she wanted, but I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. A public place? Neutral ground? When I walked in, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting in the corner, her back straight, hands wrapped around a coffee cup. And even though I had never met her before, I knew she had Ethan's eyes. Elizabeth looked up as I approached, studying me with quiet intensity. I hesitated for a second, then sat down across from her. "Mia," she said, her voice smooth but tired. "Elizabeth," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. A silence stretched between us before she finally sighed. "I know this must be a shock." I let out a dry laugh. "Shock doesn't even begin to cover it." She nodded, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I was at the funeral, you know." I frowned, caught off guard. "What?" "I sat in the back," she admitted. Veil, black dress. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't know if I had the right to. My mind reeled. I remembered seeing a woman like that, a shadow in the distance, slipping away before the service ended. I had assumed she was one of Ethan's distant colleagues, but it had been her. "Why didn't Ethan ever tell me about you?" I asked. Elizabeth exhaled sharply, setting her spoon down. Because he wanted you to believe he was someone he wasn't. Something cold settled in my stomach. What does that mean? She met my gaze. Mia, there's so much you don't know about my son. Elizabeth reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. These are medical records from 10 years ago. Ethan was diagnosed with complete azoospermia at 25. He was sterile had been his whole life. I swallowed hard. I already knew this part, but hearing it from her made it feel more real. He told me he wanted to start a family with you, she continued, but he knew he never could. I don't know if he ever planned to tell you the truth. I looked down at the envelope but didn't open it. I found out another way. Elizabeth's expression softened. Then you know Olivia's baby was never his. I nodded, my fingers tightening around my coffee cup. She tried to take my inheritance. My own parents helped her. A flicker of something dark passed over Elizabeth's face. I'm not surprised. I did some research after the funeral. Your parents, they've always favored Olivia, haven't they? I let out a bitter chuckle. That obvious? She tilted her head. A mother knows. A lump formed in my throat. Because that was the thing, I hadn't had a mother who knew. I had spent my life being the backup, the afterthought. But Elizabeth? She had noticed what my own mother never had. Tell me about him, I said suddenly. The real Ethan. Not the version he wanted me to believe in. Elizabeth looked down at her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. Ethan was complicated, she admitted. Charming, intelligent, but also deeply insecure. He wanted success, love, admiration, but he never wanted to work for it. He always found shortcuts. I swallowed hard. When he met you, she continued, I think he saw an opportunity. A stable, successful woman who would love him no matter what. And for a while, he played the part perfectly. I shook my head. No, that's not fair. He wasn't using me. Elizabeth gave me a sad look. Mia, how much money did you put into that marriage? I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because the answer was a lot. I had paid off our house, covered our bills when Ethan's business ventures flopped, supported him when he decided to leave his steady job for the next big thing, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure anymore. Elizabeth sighed. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I don't want you to keep holding on to a version of Ethan that never really existed. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. So why now? I asked. Why come forward after all this time? She hesitated, then pulled out another envelope. This one was thinner. Because I don't want you to go through what I did. I frowned, taking it. What is this? Elizabeth exhaled. A will. Ethan had another one. A separate one he wrote before you were married. My pulse kicked up. What? This one doesn't include Olivia, your parents, or anyone else, she said. It was written when he still thought he had to take care of himself. And in it, everything was left to you. I ripped the envelope open, scanning the document. It was real, dated before he met Olivia, before he started hiding things from me. This will prove that at some point, Ethan had chosen me, not Olivia, not my parents. Me? I looked up at Elizabeth, my mind racing. Does Olivia know about this? She smiled faintly. Not yet, but she will. The next morning, my lawyer contacted Olivia's legal team. We have a new will, Mr. Lawson said, his voice crisp with satisfaction. Your sister no longer has any claim to Ethan's estate. If she continues her pursuit, we will take this to trial and trust me. She won't like the outcome. Less than an hour later, Olivia called. Mia, we need to talk. I picked up this time. No, Olivia, I said, my voice steady. We really don't. She was silent for a moment, then sighed. You really won't forgive me, will you? I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. No, Olivia, I won't. And then, for the final time, I hung up. She didn't call again. The silence after Olivia's last call was different. Not the kind that left me waiting for the next fight, the next betrayal. Not the kind that made me feel empty, like something had been taken from me. This was peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for Olivia or my parents to barge back into my life with more demands, more manipulation. They had lost, and I had won. The final steps of the lawsuit wrapped up quietly. Olivia had no choice but to accept the ruling she wasn't getting a dime from Ethan's estate. With Elizabeth's help, my lawyer ensured everything was airtight. The damages Olivia owed me would hang over her for years, a reminder that actions had consequences. And my parents? They had no leverage over me anymore. After years of letting them take from me, of bending over backward just to be seen, I was done. I blocked them for good. I thought cutting them out would hurt, that there would be guilt, some deep ache reminding me of the love I was supposed to feel for them. But there was nothing. And maybe that was the real tragedy, realizing I had been holding on to something that had never really been there in the first place. The weeks after the lawsuit felt strange. I had spent so much time fighting, untangling myself from the mess Ethan and Olivia had left behind, that I didn't know what to do with my life now that I was free. So I started small. I went back to work full-time, taking on new projects, and actually enjoying my job again. The stares and whispers at the office faded after a while. Turns out, people lost interest when there wasn't fresh drama to feed on. I redecorated the house, got rid of the furniture Ethan had picked out, repainted the walls, made it mine, and I spent more time with Elizabeth. We started meeting for dinner once a week, sharing stories about Ethan, the good, the bad, the complicated. She never sugarcoated things, never tried to make him out to be someone he wasn't. He loved you, Mia, she told me one night as we sat on her balcony, drinking wine. But love doesn't always mean good. I let those words settle. I had spent months trying to understand Ethan, trying to piece together who he really was beneath all the lies. But maybe I didn't need to. Maybe it was enough to know that I had loved him once, that we had been happy, or at least I had been, and that was real, even if everything else had crumbled. A few months later, Olivia tried one last time. It came in the form of a letter, slid into my mailbox like a ghost from the past. I knew it was from her before I even picked it up. I stared at it for a long time, fingers hovering over the seal. A part of me wondered, was this her apology? Was this the moment she finally admitted everything, took responsibility, tried to make things right? Or was it just another manipulation? Another plea for money, for forgiveness, for something she didn't deserve? I would never know. Because in the end, I tossed it into the fireplace and watched the flames eat it whole. Some things weren't worth reopening. It's been a year now. A year since Ethan's death. Since Olivia's betrayal. Since I walked away from the family that never really felt like mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from someone else, from a relationship, from approval, from trying to earn love that should have been given freely. This happiness is different. It's quiet, steady. It's morning hikes with no one to answer to. It's traveling alone and loving it. It's making new friends, building a life that has nothing to do with Olivia, my parents, or even Ethan. Sometimes people ask if I'm ready to date again, if I've moved on. The answer? I don't know. Maybe one day I'll meet someone new. Maybe I won't. But for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for someone else to make me whole. I already am. Story 2. I purchased the property on which their house stood after my family took me out of the will in favor of my brother 80% of the time. Then, with legal papers strewn like fallen leaves across my father's mahogany desk, I startled them all by slipping the manila folder from my shaking fingers. Persuaded that my eyes were deceiving me, I had to read the words again. They weren't. I'm Chloe, and I recently learned that I was left out of my parents' will. Have you located the insurance documents? Mom. I jumped as I heard Vivian's voice floating up from downstairs. While they were celebrating my brother Elijah and his recent business triumph, I had promised to search for them. I yelled back. Not yet, my voice remarkably firm in spite of the raging storm of emotions that threatened to rip me to pieces. I hastily collected the papers, but one paragraph kept catching my attention. Elijah Mackenzie will receive all assets. From beneath the warm rumble of my father, the sound of laughing crept up, Edmund's giggle blending with Elijah's assured voice. The identical noises I had heard as a child, feeling like an outsider looking in all the time. My best pal, Chloe. My phone was illuminated by Leah's text. How is the meal with the family going? I took a picture of the will and emailed it to her. She responded right away. God damn, give me a call immediately. I'll be right down. I called out to my family as I slipped into the restroom in the corridor. I held my breath and pressed Leah's touch. Really, what the fuck? Leah spoke in a ferocious whisper. They did this when? The date indicates the previous month. Immediately following Elijah's elevation to CEO, I responded, clutching the sink edge. Apparently, it doesn't matter that you were busy managing your own profitable company, which you created from the ground up. I saw my image in the mirror, my black hair cascading from its meticulous placement, my green eyes gleaming with unshed tears. Mom has consistently stated that Elijah's accomplishments are more important. I jumped when I heard a knock on the door. My father's voice, honey. Dessert is being served by your mother. On the way. Leah poured cold water on my face and put on my biggest smile as I hung up the phone. The family's accomplishment was revered in the dining room. Naturally, all of Elijah's. The walls were adorned with media articles, company awards, and his graduation pictures. Only one family portrait from my college graduation, hidden away in a corner, represented my personal accomplishments. You're there. As she served tiramisu, my mother spoke. Just now, Elijah gave us an update on his latest development project. Interesting. I took a seat and managed. Have you mentioned the Anderson contract to them? In reference to the customer he had poached from my consulting business the previous month, I questioned him. Elijah smiled briefly. Ancient times. Because we are now concentrating on the future. Speaking about the future, my mother said that Elijah was thinking of purchasing a home in the area. How lovely it would be to have him nearer. I used more power than was required to stab my dessert. Fantastic. My father gently suggested that you relocate closer to the apartment downtown, Chloe. It must be cramping. Thinking about my penthouse, office space, and the city view I'd acquired through years of hard work, I said, my apartment suits me fine. Work that seemed to have no significance for them. My mother went on to say that if you meet the proper person, you can have second thoughts. Chloe should know about that beautiful lawyer you met at the country club, Elijah. I suddenly pushed my chair back. My mother objected, saying, You've hardly touched your dessert, but I should go to an early meeting tomorrow. I stopped eating. Out of habit, I gave my father a cheek kiss, picked up my bag, and made my way out the door. Chloe? After me, Elijah called. Remember next week's charity gala. The family should act as one entity. I faced him as I turned around. You wouldn't want to let the family down, would you? Streetlights and muffled shouts filled the trip home. I sat there with my hands holding the steering wheel till my knuckles turned white after parking in the garage of my building. It buzzed on my phone. Leah once more. Come on over. I have a shoulder to weep on and whine. I started typing as I was leaving when I received another text. This one came from my real estate development coworker, Valeria. Do you recall the discussion on property rights? Discovered anything intriguing. When you can, give me a call. I gazed at the text. Everything clicked into place. The household, my parents' excitement and pride, the representation of their ideal existence with their ideal son. What if? Rain. Inspect the wine. I sent Leah a text. I have to do some research. I opened my laptop and started looking through property records, now motivated by purpose. Instead of rage, my hands remained steady. They were in for a surprise if they believed they could erase me from the family legacy. I had had enough of playing the nice daughter. It was time to prove to them my true value. Are you saying that the property deed does not cover the land beneath your parents' house? With a wine glass in her hand, Leah leaned forward on my office couch. We refer to it as a land lease. I placed the papers on my coffee table and explained. When the house was constructed in the 1960s, it was quite typical. The property underneath the home was not purchased by my grandpa, and the land is no longer owned by anyone. In the 1990s, the first leasing firm filed for bankruptcy. Since then, the land has been in legal limbo. I touched my screen's property records. I doubt my folks are even aware of it. They just have to pay property taxes on the actual residence. Theoretically, someone could acquire the land outright, Leah thought, her eyes widening. That's right. My laptop clicked shut with a gratifying sound. Chloe? Leah put her wine glass down. Deliciously wicked, that is. I adore it. I heard Valeria's call on my buzzing phone. I placed her on the speaker. Without introducing herself, she remarked, You won't believe this. I spoke with my contact at the office of the county assessor. Next month, the land will be put up for public sale. Leah said, "Do it," and slapped her palm. "What is the initial bid amount?" I inquired. "The finest thing is that, due to the legal constraints, it is absurdly low. Due to the current structure, the majority of developers will not work on it." I recalled all the contemptuous remarks my mother had ever made regarding my professional decisions. "Give me the information. First in line is what I desire." Leah hung up and added more wine. "When your mother learns, she will have a stroke," I corrected her, "if she finds out. A shell corporation may be used to make the transaction. They won't recognize me." Leah's phone displayed a social media post about your mother. Take a look at what she posted yesterday. It was a picture of Elijah shaking hands with various executives from the country club. "So proud of my son's latest achievement," the caption said, carrying on his father's legacy. I took a big gulp of wine and added, "Perfectly funny. She never mentioned that my business was listed among Forbes's 30 under 30. At Christmas dinner, she mentioned that your business was only a pastime. Do you recall that?" I got up and started to pace immediately after Elijah declared his engagement to whoever it was that lasted for 3 months. "What truly kills me, do you know? Dad was different once. He used to attend all of my graduation speeches and debate contests. Then one day, he seemed to have given up." "What did you give up?" Arguing with Mom's claim that Elijah was the best child. And I was simply present. Once more, my phone buzzed. My dad texted me, "You departed so swiftly tonight. Is everything all right?" "Talk about the devil," I whispered, displaying the message to Leah. "Will you share the will with him? What's the point?" I threw the phone down. The following morning, he signed it. Valeria and I met at her workplace. More papers were strewn all over her desk, with important pages marked with post-its. She stated, "The auction will take place in 3 weeks. I've already begun your shell company's paperwork." "But are you certain about this, Chloe? Why wouldn't I be? Because you will have actual control over your family's house if you buy the property. That substance is hefty." The family pictures on the walls, all thoughtfully placed to highlight Elijah's journey to achievement, sprang to mind. They made up their minds. I'm building mine now. Something else is involved. Another paper was passed over the desk by Valeria. The development firm owned by Natasha Ray has been investigating the region. "They won't if they learn about the auction," I spoke aggressively. "What is my required amount of liquid capital?" My mother sent me a group text as Valeria was quoting figures. "This Sunday, the family will have supper. Elijah has some wonderful news," I whispered. "I think he does." "What?" Valeria raised her head. "Nothing." I put my signature on the initial documents. "Only family matters. For evaluation, send me the remaining ones." I stood at my office window later that afternoon, gazing out at the metropolitan skyline that I had fought so hard to be a part of. 2 streets away, my company's emblem shone on a skyscraper, proving that I was more than simply Elijah's younger sister. Leah sent me an email and my phone chimed. While cleaning, I came across this. A picture from 10 years ago was included. I was beaming with pride at the launch celebration for my business. There stood my father, looking very proud, with his arm around my shoulders. Elijah and my mother were conspicuously missing. Recalling that time, I touched the screen. After that, I launched my banking app and began sending money for the auction. Go for it. I spoke softly to my window reflection. Let's see whether they enjoy being helpless for once. As I adjusted my spectacles and wig, the auction room was alive with soft discussion. Valeria was sitting next to me. We both wore business clothes that were conservative enough to fit in with the other investors and developers. Lot 247 is approaching, she muttered. Remind yourself to let me bid. All you're doing is watching. When the auctioneer cleared his throat, I nodded, my heart racing. Lot 247, a piece of land in the historic district, comes next. Property that is now leased and has its current structure. A few people looked in our direction. It's likely that other developers are curious about the newcomers. Even though I could not help but see Natasha Ray 3 rows ahead in her red power suit, I maintained a neutral attitude. Valeria was right when she said that the bidding would begin low. The front row made a few hesitant proposals. Nothing major. The price doubled as Natasha's hand went up. Before jumping in, Valeria waited for 2 more offers. As the numbers increased, My palms began to perspire. This was all I had saved. Additionally, a company loan will be dependent on the next minutes. At $850,000 going once. Natasha, the auctioneer, spun around and looked around the room. Her eyes briefly met mine, but the disguise remained in place. She raised her paddle one final time and turned around. $900,000. Valeria gave me a glance. I gave her the slightest nod possible. 1,200,000. She made an obvious call. There was silence in the room. Even though Natasha's shoulder tensed, she didn't look back. 1,200,000. Going once, going twice. Sold to the 183rd bidder. As we signed the documents outside the auction house, my hands were trembling. At long last, Valeria smiled. Well done. The ground beneath your family's home is now yours. It buzzed on my phone. Speaking of relatives, Elijah texted me. At Sunday supper, I'm missing you. Your favorite lasagna is being made by Mom. I said, like hell. It's my favorite. Recalling how Mom had always substituted Elijah's favorite meat sauce for mine vegetarian one. A voice behind us called, Miss Mackenzie. Natasha Ray was walking toward us with her hand outstretched as we turned. I don't think we've ever met. My name is Pinnacle Development's Natasha Ray. I took off the glasses but left my wig on. Now there's no use hiding. Mackenzie, Chloe. Enjoyment. That was a rather daring step inside. Her eyes did not meet her grin. What plans do you have for the property? You certainly are. I grinned back at her. I'll have your office contact returned to my workspace. My dad was waiting in the foyer when I arrived. I felt sick to my stomach. Did he already know somehow? Why have you come here, Dad? Is it impossible for a parent to see his daughter at work? He surveyed the contemporary room gratefully. Chloe, this is really amazing. Regards. With caution, I said. What's actually happening? His shoulders slumped as he moaned. Mom is concerned about you. You've skipped 3 consecutive Sunday meals. I have been occupied. I closed the door after guiding him to my office. Successful company operations require time. Oh, but only when Elijah does it matter. Don't you think that's unfair, Chloe? I showed him the picture of the will that I had taken with my phone. Do you want to discuss what is truly unfair? He lost the color in his face. Where did you purchase this? Is it important? Dad, you signed it. I was deemed unworthy of inclusion by both you and your mother. It isn't that easy, he began. With this family, it never is it? I fought back tears as I turned to face the window. You ought to go. I'm attending a meeting, Chloe. On Sunday, please join us for supper. Elijah is making his engagement public. I turned around once more. For what purpose is this number used? Your mother is adamant about the entire family being present. She certainly does. The property deed in my briefcase sprang to mind. All right, I'll be present. I gave Leah a call after he departed. It's finished. The land is mine. Holy cow. She let out a squeal. What is the sensation? Horrible. Thrilling. I'm not sure. The deed was picked up by me. On Sunday, Elijah will announce another engagement. Tell me you're going, please. The time is ideal. Not quite yet, I remarked, recalling Natasha's cunning grin at the auction. I must first have everything in order. I received an email on my phone from Natasha, who wanted to talk about a possible collaboration on the Heritage District property supper tomorrow. I grinned as I recalled every contemptuous remark and every unfulfilled goal. The land deed weighed heavily in my hands each time I was pushed aside for Elijah, packed with potential, with strength, with retaliation. Go for it. Yes. I started composing my response to Natasha in a whisper. $15 million. Across the restaurant table, I put down my wine glass and looked intently at Natasha's face. For a basic land lease, that is quite an offer. Easy, Natasha chuckled. Chloe, we both know that property isn't straightforward, especially given who resides there. Halfway to my mouth, my fork hesitated. Have you completed your homework? I have, of course. Similar to how you prepared for the auction. She bent over. What is your true end goal here, I wonder? Perhaps I simply enjoy investing in real estate. Please. Natasha motioned for additional wine. To purchase the land beneath your parents' house, you took out a loan secured by your business. It's a personal matter. I took another drink of wine, keeping my gaze fixed on you. What if it is, too? After that, we might be able to support one another. She slid a tablet across the table after taking it out. Check out our plans for the area's growth. The designs depicted a contemporary mixed-use development with luxury condominiums, retail stores, and offices where my parents' house formerly stood. Do you intend to tear down the house? Flatly, I replied. Our goal is to bring the area back to life. Of course, your parents would receive significant compensation. Elijah texted me and my phone chimed. You're where? A family gathering at the residence. Important information. Please pardon me. As I moved away from the table to contact Natasha, I said, Why is this so urgent? When he responded, I inquired. The house is being sold by Mom and Dad. I felt sick to my stomach. What? There have been bids from a developer in the area. In any case, they believe it's time to shrink. I turned to look at Natasha, who was drinking her wine in a composed manner. When did they make this decision? Right now. Mom is already discussing Florida condominiums. Come on over here. We must talk about the specifics. When I entered my parents' living room 20 minutes later, they were seated around the coffee table. There are real estate listings everywhere. You're there. My mom seldom raised her head. Elijah has discovered the ideal location in Palm Beach. We may live next door. Are you also relocating to Florida? I questioned him. Julia adores the sea. He encircled his fiancée, the most recent of whom I had met precisely twice. How about this house? I asked thoughtfully, every memory in this place. Oh, sweetheart. My mother gave me a patronizing pat on the hand. We must occasionally let go of the past. Furthermore, it would be impossible to turn down the offer from Pinnacle Development. You've spoken with them already. I struggled to maintain a steady voice. Last week, their representative contacted them. Very professional, my father observed. Their offer is far higher than the going rate. I said, Of course they are. What was that? Nothing. I took out my phone and sent Valeria a text. They're trying to sell. Chloe, you have to hurry up. My thoughts were interrupted by my mother's words. We ought to talk about the will while you're here. I jerked my head up. How about it? We'll have to make some changes now that the house has been sold. Elijah as the executor. I really cut in while standing. I had to leave. I have a meeting for supper. More significant than family. I could feel my mother's disdain. Mom, you tell me you know what's essential in this family better than anybody else. Natasha was still waiting in the restaurant, so I drove right back there. You were aware? I sank into my seat and accused. You were aware that they intended to sell. I was aware that they were thinking about it. She grinned. It makes a difference, doesn't it? In what way? You have a choice now, though. You have the option to halt the transaction or disclose your ownership, very likely ruining your familial ties in the process. She stopped and swirled her drink. Or you may work with me to turn a solid profit while giving them the impression that they made the decision on their own. I reflected about my father's silent acceptance of everything and my mother's contemptuous Pat Elijah's nonchalant revelation about Florida. What precisely are you suggesting? Natasha grinned broadly. Allow them to sign the selling contract. We then disclosed that the land was privately owned. Naturally, they will feel ashamed, but by that point, it won't matter. The house is going to be sold. You'll be satisfied, and they'll have their money. You will also receive your growth. Everyone benefits. She lifted her glass. What are your thoughts? Once more, my phone buzzed. Leah texted, What is the status of Operation Revenge? I glanced at Natasha's eager expression before turning my attention to the tablet's development plans. Steel and glass would take the place of the home where I grew up. Like so many of my accomplishments, my childhood house had been expunged from family discussions. I need time to reflect. Finally, I said. Avoid taking too long. Dropping her business card on the table, Natasha got up. Such opportunities don't come along very often. Long after she had left, I remained at the table, looking at the card and wondering how retribution had become so difficult. What did your mother do? Leah invited the Pinnacle Development team to Sunday supper and almost dropped her coffee cup as we were sitting in my office the next morning. I stated as I paced to the pot roast supper, where Elijah was announcing his engagement, to talk about the neighborhood's future. It looks like it will be a big event. I looked at my phone. My father missed 3 calls. Half of the country club has been invited by Mom. Are you leaving? Valeria rushed in and waved a paper before I could respond. Natasha, we've got an issue. Ray just submitted applications for accelerated development permissions. I told her she couldn't do that if she didn't own the land. Your parents' written intent to sell is cited by her as preliminary evidence. Spread the papers on my desk, Valeria. She is going quickly. Chloe. Once more my phone buzzed. My dad, I responded this time. Chloe. Thank God, he said. Are you able to grab coffee with me? By yourself? I discovered him 20 minutes later at our old favorite cafe, which we used to go to following my high school debating tournaments. He appeared older, weary. As he pushed a folder across the table in search of documentation for the house sale, he stated without introduction, I found something in the attic. Clippings from the newspaper were inside. Every item that has ever been written about my company accomplishments has meticulously saved my Chamber of Commerce award, Forbes profile, and even the little piece from my very first customer signing. Did you keep these? I did, of course. He absently stirred his coffee. Chloe, I acknowledge that I haven't always defended you. Your mom. Her views on familial legacy are strong. Do you mean the legacy of Elijah? I ought to have put up more of a fight. He raised his head. Wet eyes. The will. I didn't think of it. However, you signed it. I did, and ever since he took out another paper, I've been regretting it every day. I had this made up last week for that reason. Elijah and I were to share everything evenly under the new will. Dad, I still haven't shown your mom, or Elijah. He made a move for my hand. Here's something more you should know about the property sale before I go any further. My heart stopped beating. How about it? Tessa, our attorney. She discovered certain anomalies in the property documents. The land lease, perhaps. My mother's words pierced the moment like a dagger as the cafe door chimed. What are you doing here, Edmund? She was standing there with Elijah at her side as we both turned around. My daughter and I are having coffee, my father stated firmly. Do you want to come along? My mother dropped into a chair and added, Actually, we must talk about the supper on Sunday. Elijah has made his major declaration, and the Pinnacle team has verified. I am aware of the will. I spoke without thinking. There was silence in the cafe. My mom's face became white, then solidified. She said, How dare you look through our private papers? You have no right to exclude me from the family. I fired back. Elijah interrupted. It's not like that. The family company? Which family business? I gave a sour laugh. Your business is not as successful as mine. But Chloe, it was never important, was it? The tone of my mom's speech was cold. You're creating a commotion. No, Mom. At last, I'm going to talk. I took my phone out and opened the property records. There's something you should know regarding the house sale since we're all here. How about it? Elijah raised his head. Ready to show them everything, my finger lingered over the screen. Then I saw the face of my dad. The meticulously maintained clippings, the new will in his pocket, and the optimism there. It buzzed on my phone. Natasha, there is not much time left. Have we made a deal? I glanced at my mother's strict disapproval and my relatives. Elijah's simulated worry, the silent guilt of my father. Years of being ignored and feeling invisible, of seeing my accomplishments disregarded. The lease for the land. Finally, I said, before signing anything with Pinnacle, you might want to ask Tessa to investigate. Why? My mom insisted. Just have faith in me. I got up and gathered my belongings. And Mom, too. On Sunday, I'll be at supper. I had to go outside and make my own announcement. I gave Natasha a call. I've already decided. Observing my family via the cafe window, I murmured. The new will was being drawn by my father. Natasha inquired as my mother read it, her face turning angry. Let's revisit those ideas for development. However, we do it my way this time. After hanging up, I texted Leah. The time has come. It's going to be an intriguing Sunday supper. The reaction was instantaneous. Do you want me to be a backup there? I saw Elijah follow my mother as she raced out of the cafe. With his head in his hands, my father sat by himself. Yes, please bring popcorn. I typed it back. Dinner on Sunday seemed like a powder keg on the verge of blowing up. My mom had gone above and beyond. Glasses made of crystal. All right, China. There are fresh flowers everywhere. Natasha Ray appeared quite comfortable as she spoke with Elijah and his fiancée, Julia, while the Pinnacle development team sat at one end of the dining table. Chloe. For the guests, my mother's voice was honey sweet. Do you want to assist me in the kitchen? Leah, who was sitting next to my father, gave me an encouraging wink as I followed her. Why is she in this place? When we were alone, my mother pointed at Leah and hissed, She is my plus one. Like Julia and Elijah, I began setting out snacks on a silver tray. That's not the same. Family is Julia. For the time being, I mumbled, recalling Elijah's 3 prior commitments. She grabbed my arm, I heard. Tonight, you dare not cause a disturbance. This Apex transaction is too significant. Oh, Mama, I wouldn't even consider it. I gave a charming smile. Remember, all I'm here to do is announce? She squinted. Which announcement? You'll see. Natasha was mid-range back in the dining room. The neighborhood will be totally changed by the construction. Property prices will skyrocket. Sounds fantastic. Edmund, my mom smiled. It sounds fantastic, doesn't it? As he pushed food about his plate, my father gave an inattentive nod. Since the event in the coffee, he had not looked at anybody. Elijah really stood up and lifted his glass. I want to make an announcement with Julia before we talk business. Let's get started. Leah squeezed my hand beneath the table and said, We're getting married. We're building our ideal house in the area as part of the Pinnacle development, and Julia displayed her huge diamond ring. My mom started crying with happiness. Natasha grinned as if she had won the lottery. My dad only gazed at his dish. Well done. Standing, I said. What? The time was ideal. Chloe, I also have an announcement to make. There was caution in my father's words. Actually, it's about the development project. I took out a folder concerning the property on which the house is located. Natasha's grin wavered a bit. My mom stopped sobbing. How about it? Elijah inquired. Okay. A humorous tale. I began distributing copies of the property records. As it turns out, since 1960, the land beneath this home has existed independently of the property deed. Additionally, it was bought at a public auction 3 weeks ago. The room fell quiet. Who did it? I thought my mother's voice was threatening. Through my company, I was able to meet her gaze across the table. You may, in theory, sell the house to Pinnacle. However, the land is mine. There was anarchy. My mom tipped her wine glass over. Elijah began yelling about commitment to family. In dread, Julia gripped her ring. This is not possible. My mom let out a cry. She can, in fact. Natasha spoke out with ease. She is quite entitled to do so. Everyone looked at her. You were acquainted with Elijah. I knew, of course. What do you believe caused me to ask Chloe to join Pinnacle as a partner? Natasha grinned. The most important component of the development puzzle is her spouse. My mom had a crimson face. No collaboration will exist. Our family's residence is here. You are prepared to sell the house to strangers. The house that was supposed to be a part of Elijah's ideal existence was shot back by me. Similar to everything else, it's unfair. Elijah got off to a good start. As if it were fair to write me out of the will, I laughed. Like it was fair to discount all of my accomplishments. I held on to them. Silently, my father said. Everybody looked at him. What? My mom inquired. Her accomplishments. Every trophy, every press clipping, all of them were mine. At last, he raised his head. When Elijah's life was being planned by you, our daughter created her own empire, and ourselves. She never received the credit she merited from me. Edmund, my mom let out a gasp. No, Viviana. Enough. He got to his feet. Chloe, you have the right to use the land any way you see fit. You deserve it. Natasha's throat cleared. Maybe now would be a good moment to talk about Chloe's alternate growth plan. I took out another stack of papers. The home remains, but we construct a mixed-use area around it to retain the neighborhood's past while bringing it into the present. Under my conditions, the family maintains their house. Your terms? Mom spat. Indeed. First, the new will, dividing everything evenly. A genuine recognition of my position within this family. The room became quiet once more. Leah tightened her grip on my hand. Elijah finally said something. Whatever you want, I'll sign. Don't destroy our house, please. I glanced at my father. who gave me the slightest gesture of approval after my mother, who sat stiff with rage. "All right," I responded as I lifted my glass. "Should we talk about terms?" "Put your signature on it, Mom." I shoved the updated will across the conference table of the lawyer. We had finally arrived a week after the dinner surprise. The truth moment. "This is blackmail," she responded, holding the pen with shaking fingers. "No, there are repercussions." I'm still standing. My father and Leah are at my sides. "Without my help, you can't sell the house. And unless things change, you won't receive it." Elijah, who was seated next to our mother, grabbed her hand. "Just sign it, Mom. Chloe is correct. We've had enough of this." Elijah to Ed. With tears in her eyes, she turned to face him. "Following everything that I have done for you." "That's precisely the issue," he answered softly. "You've done everything for me, but nothing for Chloe." I've never noticed it before, but now I do. Our family attorney, Tessa, cleared her throat. "Mackenzie, Miss S, the conditions are reasonable. A seat on the board of the new development project, influence over family assets, equal inheritance, and collaborative decision-making, as well as the house." The sound of my mother's voice was hardly audible. I responded, "Remains in the family trust. As equal trustees, all of us. No more making choices in secret or playing favorites." My dad came forward. "Please, Viviana, something amazing has been created by our daughter. It's time we accepted that by demanding respect and holding our house hostage. You never gave freely, but I fixed it." With the exception of the wall clock's gentle ticking, the room became quiet. My mother picked up the pen at last. With a flourish, she signed, "You'll regret this. Dividing the family? No, Mom. That was all your own doing." Natasha engaged with the development contracts as soon as she signed. The time was ideal. Should we talk about the neighborhood's future? The following hour was a haze of legalese and signatures. When someone made stiff gestures to sign, my mother wouldn't look at them. Surprisingly, Elijah agreed with every suggestion, even offering ideas for how to use my company's identity in the project. As the last paper was signed, I said one more thing. The house's wall of family photos. How about it? My mom lost her temper. It is descending. Everything. We're swapping it out with a new one that fairly highlights everyone's accomplishments. My father answered hastily. "I have those clippings. Additionally, your award ceremonies are launched with business photographs." "I also have some," Elijah said. "Since the Harvard Business School speech you gave." I retained the software. Startled, I turned to face him. "You arrived to that conclusion?" "I did, of course. My sister is you." He cast his gaze downward. "I ought to have mentioned how amazing it was at the time. However, Mom, I wouldn't have given my consent." Our mother ended on a sour note. "What do you mean by that?" He responded confidently. "Yes, that's precisely what I mean." Natasha collected the agreements. "Chloe, I would say that this morning has been fruitful. Should we get together to talk about the groundbreaking ceremony tomorrow?" My mother got up suddenly after she had gone. "Mom, I guess you're all really proud of yourself." "Softer now," I replied. "No one's approval is the goal here. Fixing what's broken is the goal. Before you, nothing was broken. It was all broken. Every time you disregarded my accomplishments, my voice broke. Every time you ignored me and gave Elijah credit. I always felt inadequate because of you. Something was broken. Finally, I have the strength to mend it." Leah gave me a comforting shoulder rub. My dad shifted to stand next to me. I went on, "The question is, do you have the courage to own up to your mistakes?" My mother glanced around the room at my father's silent support, at Elijah's resolute expression, and at the signed paperwork that made all the difference. Something flared in her eyes for a second. Maybe recognition or regret. At last, she responded, "I need time. Take as much time as you need." I said, "I'm not going away, and neither is the home." Without saying another word, she walked away, and my father, who had just given me a short embrace, followed. That picture of my Harvard speech hung on Elijah's mind. "You really preserved it," I remarked. "I have a lot of possessions." He showed me a folder of saved articles on my business after taking out his phone. "Chloe, I was proud of you. I simply didn't know how to express it without upsetting my mother. And now, right now," He gave a little smile. I'm saying it now. I'm sorry it took this for me to acknowledge how amazing you are, sis. When everyone had gone, Leah gave me a strong embrace. You succeeded. You did it, in fact. Yes, I said, glancing at the signed papers. However, why does it not seem like a win? Because, she said sagely, it's not over. Winning or losing is no longer the point of this. It has to do with recovery. I nodded while picturing my mother's expression when she signed the will. Isn't the difficult part simply getting started? Most likely, Leah concurred. However, you're not going through it alone this time. The neighborhood was blissfully calm now that the construction workers had finally departed for the day. A balanced chronicle of our family's actual history had taken the place of the previous Elijah-centric exhibit, which had been carefully packed away while I watched the new photo wall being hung in the living room of the family home. It buzzed on my phone. For tomorrow's opening, a text message from Natasha Press has been confirmed. Even though I knew your mother wouldn't come, I said, your mother is still deciding. Leah stepped back to look at our work and remarked, the symmetry is perfect. Examine the harmony between your father's engineering honors, Elijah's Business Weekly story, and your Forbes cover. With a frame adjustment, Valeria added, how many patents did he have? My father entered via the front entrance with a little package. In the attic, I discovered more pictures. We're running low on wall space, Dad. When I saw his face, I stopped laughing. He produced a frame covered in dust. The day you won your first debate championship was captured on camera by your mother. In the picture, I was a teenager carrying a prize and my mother was standing next to me, grinning. I had forgotten there was a grin. I recall that day, I muttered. Then she brought me out for ice cream. Previously, prior to Elijah being accepted to Harvard, before things changed, my father was finished. Put it up, Leah said, exactly in the middle. The door opened again as we were working. Elijah was there this time, looking worn out yet resolute. Without a prelude, he declared that Julia had departed. What? I looked away from the wall. Why? She desired the development, the ideal family, the social wedding, the ideal home, and the fairy tale. He gave a shrug. I informed her that I was done acting. Are you all right? I inquired. Yes, in fact. He looked at the picture wall. Hello, is that from the championship debate? Mom seemed content. She was. According to my father, we were all before we got lost. And from the doorway came a voice. All of us turned to find our mother standing there, shielded by her purse. Tomorrow is the development opening, she stated rigidly. I take it that you want me to come, just if you'd like to. I gave a thoughtful response. Her gaze was fixated on the picture wall as she entered the room. I answered, you kept the old pictures, the real ones, the ones that provide our entire narrative, not the version you were hoping to view. She extended her hand and touched the picture of the debate championship. That day you were very proud, and I felt proud of it, until you concluded that the only things that counted were Elijah's accomplishments. That is, until I told myself it was true. Quietly, she corrected. Chloe, I was mistaken. The room became silent. I hadn't heard her say those words in 32 years. I ruined the real family because I was so preoccupied with creating the ideal one. She looked over at me. Your development plans preserve what is important while constructing something new, keeping the home construction around it. I ought to have handled our family that way. Mom, Elijah began. Let me be done. Her shoulders erect. I can do better today, but I can't change the past. Beginning with the opening tomorrow, how about it? I inquired. If you don't mind, I would want to speak in order to publicly recognize the accomplishments of both of my children. I glanced to my father, who was grinning through tears, after Leah gave me a supportive nod. All right, I answered, but stop acting like that. The ideal family facade is over. No, she concurred. Just us. Exactly as we are. She took a step toward the wall and studied each picture intently. The newspaper clipping from your first real estate transaction and Elijah's Community Service Award, which he received for educating at-risk youngsters' business skills, should be included. You were aware of that? Surprised, Elijah inquired. She acknowledged, I know more than I've shown. Simply put, I was too proud to admit anything that didn't go according to my plan. It felt like a weight lifting, or a window opening after a long winter as we worked together, adding new photographs and moving others around. My mother eventually took a step back and remarked, "There. The truth is now revealed." I glanced at the wall-mounted tale of our family, the successes and setbacks, the moments of perfection and muck. "It's all true. It's all ours. The truth suits us well," I said. Mom stretched out and grabbed my hand. Then Elijah's. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, it does." Our new family photo wall was illuminated by the lengthy shadows made by the light outside the windows. In the end, it's beautifully honest, but not flawless or perfect.